Diogenes was a homeless who rejected all material possessions. He lived in a large tub and owned nothing but a cloak and a cup. One day he saw a boy drinking water from his hands. Realizing he didn't need the cup, he tossed it away, yelling, "A child has beaten me in plainness of living." Diogenes used to masturbate in public and pee on the people who walked by him. But he was also a genius who was very famous all through Greece. Plato, one of the greatest philosophers at the time, was asked once, "How can you define humans?" He answered, "Featherless bipeds." Hearing this, Diogenes plucked a chicken and brought it to Plato's academy, shouting, "Behold, I've brought you a man." This caused Plato to change his definition by adding, "with broad, flat nails." Diogenes' name traveled all the way to Alexander the Great, who was the king in that period. Hearing about the famous philosopher who lived in extreme simplicity, Alexander decided to meet him. He found Diogenes resting in the sunlight. Approaching the philosopher, Alexander stood before him and said, "I am Alexander the Great." Diogenes, without showing any sign of being impressed or intimidated, looked up and replied, "And I am Diogenes the Cynic." Intrigued by Diogenes' lack of interest, he said to Diogenes, "Ask of me anything you wish, and I will grant it." Diogenes thought for a moment and then responded, "Stand out of my sunlight." Alexander was in shock but amused by this bold request. Instead of being offended, he admired Diogenes even more. Turning to his companions, Alexander said, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Diogenes replies that, "If I were not Diogenes, I would also wish to be Diogenes." Diogenes was the most known philosopher to practice cynicism, the art of living only with what you need. He was so good that he was nicknamed Diogenes the Cynic, which means Diogenes the dog-like. People tried to make fun of him and would throw bones at him during dinners, treating him as if he were literally a dog. Instead of reacting with anger or shame, Diogenes took the insult to turn the tables on his mockers. When people threw bones at him, he would respond by acting like a dog in return and start peeing on them. One day, Diogenes was washing vegetables when the philosopher Aristippus, who lived comfortably by flattering the wealthy, saw him and said, "If you would learn to be subservient to the king, you wouldn't have to wash vegetables." Diogenes replied, "And if you learned to wash vegetables, you wouldn't have to flatter the king." Diogenes was often seen begging from statues. When someone asked him why he did this, he replied, "I am practicing rejection." When Diogenes' simple tub was destroyed by youths, people expected him to be upset. Instead, he cheerfully said, "Now, the mice won't have a place to nest." Once a corrupt official tried to avoid Diogenes, knowing the philosopher disapproved of his actions. When they finally crossed paths, the official said, "Don't look at me, Diogenes." The philosopher replied, "Don't worry, I won't. I don't want anything to do with a man who can't face himself." During a solar eclipse, everyone was gazing up at the sky. Diogenes began staring at the ground. When asked why, he said, "I'm trying to see what's so fascinating that everyone has forgotten to look down." All these stories aren't just tales of a man behaving like crazy. They're glimpses into a philosophy that challenges us even today. Diogenes believed that to find true happiness, we must strip away the unnecessary layers that society places upon us. He showed that by living simply, focusing on what we truly need, and questioning the rules that don't make sense, we can live more authentically. He wasn't just rejecting material possessions, he was embracing freedom. Freedom from want, from societal expectations, and from the pressures to conform. Instead of giving lectures, he lived his philosophy daily. His minimalistic lifestyle was a practical demonstration of his beliefs. His shocking behaviors were meant to make people think differently. By stepping outside of norms, he encouraged others to question their own beliefs and actions. By limiting his wants, he wasn't controlled by the pursuit of wealth or comfort. This allowed him to be free in ways that others weren't. Diogenes saw himself as a citizen of the world. He believed that all people are fundamentally the same, regardless of their social status or nationality. Diogenes' ideas influenced many others and remain relevant even today. Later philosophers, like the Stoics, were inspired by his emphasis on virtue and living according to nature. In his later years, as Diogenes grew old, his friends and followers became concerned about what should be done with his body after he passed away. They approached him and asked Diogenes, "How would you like us to honor you after your death? What are your wishes for your burial?" Diogenes, ever the unconventional thinker, replied calmly, "When I die, throw me over the city walls so the wild animals can feast on me." Shocked by his response, they protested, "How can you suggest such a thing? It's disrespectful. Aren't you worried about being eaten by beasts?" With a sly grin, Diogenes retorted, "Why should I care? I'll be dead and won't feel anything." They pressed further, "But it's undignified. Don't you want us to provide you with a proper burial?" He responded, "If it makes you feel better, place a stick next to me so I can chase the animals away." Confused, they said, "But you won't be able to use it once you're gone." Diogenes replied, "Exactly. So why worry about what happens to my body after I'm dead if I won't be aware of it?" There are many speculations about how he died. Some think that he died from an infected dog bite. Considering he was known as the dog, it's a poetic end that ties back to his life's identity. Some say that he choked while eating a raw octopus, but my favorite is that he just decided it was time to go and held his breath until he died. Regardless of how he died, what's certain is that Diogenes left a legacy that has endured for over 2,000 years. His death, much like his life, remains a subject of stories and reflections, highlighting a man who dared to defy convention at every turn. Diogenes lived life on his own terms, constantly pushing others to question their beliefs and the structures of society. His unwavering commitment to simplicity, honesty, and living naturally made him a legend in his own time and a philosopher whose ideas continue to resonate. Even in death, he taught us a lesson, that we often worry about things that no longer matter once we're gone. Perhaps the best way to honor Diogenes is not through grand memorials, but by embracing the virtues he held dear: authenticity, simplicity, and the courage to live according to our own values. So, what can we learn from Diogenes today? Maybe it's a reminder to strip away the unnecessary, to question the norms that don't serve us, and to find contentment not in what we have, but in who we are.